All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Me here talking real music in real time for a few real people out there, just like you and just like me. Um, Before I get going on this one, the video that is, it's Jeff Scott Soto doing a real cool rock and roll pose on this particular album. Uh, the album's called Complicated, and it's really good. If you enjoy melodic rock, hard driving stuff, but some twists and turns and a few surprises on this record. Jeff has really put together one of his better solo albums ever. And it's really good. Could be one of the best melodic rock records of 2022. Jeff, of course, sang lead vocals for the band Journey for 11 months, almost a year, and was really good when he was in the band. Just putting it out there. So Journey's Freedom album comes out on Friday. That would be July the 8th, in case you want to pre-order a copy of the album. I would recommend doing so, despite what critics are already saying about this record. Before I get started on this, has Journey ever gotten a break from critics? I'm actually really surprised that Journey got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. If you go watch videos where Steve Perry is doing interviews back in the 80s, and there are quite a few of those available to watch on YouTube, he's constantly talking about how the critics, we just really care about what the fans have to say. And in a few instances, Perry goes right after the critics. They're a corporate rock band. They're successful with the general population, all of the unwashed masses in the heartland. They like to listen to Journey. Their lyrics are forward looking. They're optimistic. They're basically for real simple people, right? For the deplorable class of people. And hence, the small town girl, the small town boy. You can go through most of the lyrics. I think of this tune they did a few years ago called Faith in the Heartland. It actually appeared, I believe, both on Revelation and on the Generations album. But that particular song was really indicative of, say, where Jonathan Cain was as a songwriter. But that harkens back to his early days with the band. And on the Escape album, it isn't meant to be deep or complicated or hard to understand. The music is there for people to enjoy and to get away from the struggles. Whereas in the 90s, we were all told that we had to be down with the struggle, right? And we needed to empathize with these lyrics. And if you were having a bad day, these songs would come along and make you feel worse, right? Whereas Journey, for the most part, is a band that wants you to feel better. They want you to listen and enjoy and have a positive mood, right? So yesterday, this song, United We Stand, came out. And there were a few critics that decided to talk about, the entire album. I'm assuming that some of these folks have had the album for a little while and have been listening to it, but we don't get a lot of specifics. What we get really from the critics is, hey, this is kind of formula, Journey sounding like Journey. I mean, do people really want that anymore? And what's weird is the band released one song called Let It Rain, right? Which does not sound like traditional Journey unless you go back to the days of Neil Sean's spaceman afro, right? If you remember that, pretty amazing hair. I don't know how you maintain that, but Neil had the big afro back in the day. And you know what? I thought it was kind of cool. A lot of people came along and said, what are they doing? We can't really hear Arnell. His vocal is like tracked in a weird way. There's a lot of guitar. It's all distorted. It's like a jam session that they put lyrics to. And that's what the band was famous for on their first three albums, really. So I was like, hey, this is just going back to the early days of Journey, except, Arnell has the tenor voice, whereas Greg Raleigh did not, so there were a couple of differences there. But the rock critics, right, never liked Journey because they became super successful. Their manager, Herbie Herbert, knew exactly what to do to make this band popular. I think he borrowed some ideas from the Kiss franchise. I remember hearing about the Journey lunchboxes and the Journey marketing, all kinds of stuff that they were doing. Obviously, they were huge when it came to selling T-shirts and other paraphernalia. But musically speaking, they were able to, reach an entire generation of people with music that they could understand, music that they could relate to, music that they could feel good about. And the band has continued along in that vein. Keep in mind, Jonathan Cain, as a songwriter, I think knows how to reach ordinary, deplorable type people. Journey's song, Don't Give Up on Us, was raked through the coals by several radio station type characters. By the way, those people are not playing Don't Give Up on Us. They're not putting it on the radio, but of course they're accusing it of being Separate Ways or somewhat like Separate Ways. And yeah, okay. And any other critiques that you have? Journey sounding like Journey, huh? Oh, how could you do that? Then on Let It Rain, people are like, oh, Journey not sounding like Journey. What's going on? Why doesn't Journey sound like Journey? So you see, this is all very schizophrenic to me. It's like, all right, we're going to critique this band, a band that people feel comfortable with, and we're going to say, look, they're just playing it safe. It's formula. They're doing what they've always done. These songs, too, some of them are a bit too long. They need to be chopped down a bit, huh? I mean, so you don't want to hear the band jamming out. You've got this great rhythm section that plays on this record. You've got one of the world's greatest guitar players ever. Yeah, I said it. It's true. I know he's not ranked very high on anyone's critics list, but Neil Schon is one of the... Talk to Sammy Hagar, right? Talk to some people who really know, who've hung out with really great guitar players, and they'll tell you how great Neil Schon is. Don't listen to your typical rock publications because they're not going to even talk about Neil all that much, which is, again, whether you like Neil Schon or not as a person, whether you like Journey as a band, you can't really argue about how great he is as a player. So, if the band decides they want to put out a song that showcases Neil Schon in the last 2 or 3 minutes of the track, and by the way, who cares, right? Because radio isn't going to play this. It's not like the band is going to have to edit down one of these songs so radio will play it, because radio has no interest in Journey. I mean, that song, Don't Give Up on Us, that should have been on every radio station that claims to be a classic rock station. Brand new music from Journey. The hits of yesterday and today, or, they could do a segment where they play Separate Ways and then they play Don't Give Up on Us right after it. And people will go, wow, kind of sounds like Journey being Journey, right? Well, it's too similar. It's confusing because we all just want to play Separate Ways 8 times a day, and they're coming out with a song that sounds like Separate Ways. People might want to listen to that song. And, we want to keep playing the same old songs over and over again. There are a lot of things at work here. I do believe culturally, even though Journey has made their mark thanks to Don't Stop Believin', and then you've got, Stranger Things out there. Separate Ways, by the way, a different remixed haunting version is in Separate Ways. That's why Kate Bush, by the way, Kate Bush, Running Up That Hill, a college radio song from 1985, is like the biggest thing in the country. So my advice to Neil Schon and Jonathan Cain, try to get one of these new songs in some kind of movie or video game or something, because apparently that's the way you do it today. You don't, work your way onto radio and then people request the song and the song moves up the charts and so forth. That whole idea is now, ancient history. But getting back to this idea that, oh, well, Journey isn't really doing anything new. And then there is the critique of Arnel Pineda. For years, I've heard he's just a vocal doppelganger. He is just somebody who kind of sounds like Steve Perry. That's all he's good for. What? What are you saying? Have you heard the guy sing? Have you seen the guy perform? Have you watched him be the front man of this band now for what, 15 years? Hello? He's really good. And no, he's not exactly like Steve Perry. There are other people who are probably closer to Perry out there, but Arnel is, good enough in this vocal range. And I think he's really on his game lately. And I've said that a number of times. But he's not exactly like Steve Perry. Nobody is like Steve Perry. That's the problem, okay? Dean Castronova, who is also in this band and plays drums and happens to sing, and I do believe that you're going to hear Dean on this new album, which I don't think any of the critics have really talked about Dean, but Dean sings a lot like Steve Perry from time to time, and again, he's not exactly like Steve Perry, but vocally he's pretty close. The point is, nobody's going to be exactly like Steve. And I think if you're a critic and you're saying, well, they just replaced Perry with some guy who sounds like him. Okay, and your point is, and your problem is what? I've always said, if your vocalist has problems and can't do what they used to do, keep in mind, Steve Perry and Journey parted ways, okay? They went their separate ways, pun intended. And Perry could still, do what he had always done at that point when he left. So it's kind of sad because who knows how many years he could have gone on with Journey, but people weren't getting along and Perry wanted certain things and the band wanted certain things. And Perry didn't want them to go on, but they decided to continue on with Steve Augeri and then briefly with Jeff Scott Soto right here. And then with Arnel, who's been at this now for 15 years, and he's doing a very good job. The critique of Arnel, I think, is the most irritating to me. First of all, for all you folks who believe that Steve Perry is the greatest singer for Journey ever, you are correct, okay? Nobody is saying that you're not correct. What I'm saying is that Arnel has got his own style. He sings in a similar fashion to Perry, but he doesn't sound exactly like Steve Perry, right? Because I don't think you'd have as many complaints if he sounded exactly like Steve Perry. But the critics who are lazy and, they're probably all like, oh man, I drew the short straw. I got to talk about this new Freedom album. So they're going to make me listen to it. I'd rather be listening to something sort of sinister and dark and maniacal and helps me feel bad about the world. Why do I have to listen to all of this, gobbledygook, right? Why do I have to put my ears to the speaker to hear United We Stand, right? Who wants to hear that when I can hear something really menacing and negative? Seriously. I mean, and people, I don't even know if they realize what's happened to music over the years, that there was a certain part of the music world that would focus on making people feel good, right? And most of those bands, by the way, that we grew up listening to, for some reason, aren't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, if you've kind of noticed. Now, Journey got in because the culture spoke and said, they're just too big. I'm sorry. Don't Stop Believing alone. Steve Perry, he's going to be there at the ceremony, and not everybody knew for sure if he would attend. But that was one for the ages, right? And there's no question that Journey should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not just based on what the culture thinks, but based on their catalog, based on how great they are as musicians, right? But nowadays, it's as if all of these bands that we grew up listening to They're kind of like guilty pleasures. Oh, REO Speedwagon, you like them? That's funny. They should be in the Hall of Fame. Styx, you think they're good? Mr. Roboto, really? Don't get me started. That's a tangent. But yeah, they should be in the Hall of Fame. They should be. Foreigner's not in there. Look at all these bands, right, that aren't in the Hall of Fame. What do they have in common? They appeal to the simpleton. They appeal to someone who wants to listen to a really good song and isn't concerned if the song is critiquing something or making some kind of political statement. No, we just want to hear really good music. Kansas, for crying out loud, Kansas is not in the Hall of Fame. Kerry Livgren, you know why? Because Kerry Livgren wrote songs sort of looking toward, a greater purpose in life. His Christianity spilled over into his songwriting. And heaven forbid, pun intended, that people hear that message and go, maybe I should think about things more important than myself. And getting right back to Journey there, that's the way Jonathan Cain writes. And Jonathan Cain has been writing that way even before he started hanging out with his wife, his current wife, Paula White. Way before that. That was him, and he can document that. He can tell you what the formula was, that we were going to write songs that appeal to the heartland. And quite honestly, the critics hate that. And they're still doing it today. Freedom, the title of the album, and the fact that, I'm thinking Neil Sean signed off on this stuff, right? So he's okay with it. He's okay with an album called Freedom. Maybe Neil has come to the realization that, locking citizens down for a couple of years, right, and not letting people interact and not letting people see a live concert performance isn't a good thing. And they're still trying to curtail this. They're still trying to tamp down on it 2.5 years later. I said a long time ago it was never going to end. And this album is about getting back to the way things used to be, right? That was the first single. They want to get back to the way things were. But the critics look at that and go, oh, they're not willing to do their part. And now they're like, what, promoting the Constitution? No, not really. United We Stand is a concept. I think that's really important. But it's not as if they're giving you a lesson on civics on this album. They're also just writing songs like Don't Give Up on Us. In other words, don't quit. Don't stop believing. It's the same kind of theme, right? The word don't is in there. Don't be stupid could be a song title. I don't know how well that would do because it's kind of condescending, but that would be for some other band who, is trying to appeal to that group. If you want music to commiserate to, turn on mainstream rock radio. If you want to commiserate, plenty of stuff on there. Just the sound of it will make you feel ill, right? It'll make you feel depressed and nervous and anxious. Whereas Journey writes this great song, United We Stand or Don't Give Up on Us, even Let It Rain with all that guitar and all that kind of weird vocal and instrumental distortion and stuff. Even that is better than the crap you're going to hear on mainstream rock stations today. And it's been that way for 30 plus years now, and there's no end in sight. It's not as if all the good stuff is just going to take over. I'd like to see some new bands come along to kind of replenish, the inventory a bit, because these old bands, eventually they're not going to be able to do this stuff anymore. So rather than the critics celebrating Journey's first new album in 11 years, it's the same old crap. It's, we never really liked this band and we all kind of drew the short straw. We got to talk about it. Too much guitar solo. Songs are too long. They're too formulaic. I mean, Journey is sounding like Journey. They can't, come on. And Arnell is just Steve Perry, right? He's like the Asian version of Steve Perry. Huh? No, he's not. He's his own guy. He's really good at what he does. I don't know, people. Do I think Arnell is as good as Steve Perry? No. And Arnell will tell you, I'm not as good as Steve Perry. Is he a carbon copy of Steve Perry? No, he's not. Again, if he was, we wouldn't be having this discussion. If they had found a guy who was exactly like Steve, looked like Steve, sang like Steve perfectly, most people would be like, wow, I can't believe they found somebody exactly like Steve Perry. And people would still probably say, though, you know what? I still miss Steve Perry. Look, Steve Perry was a part of this band when they were writing those songs back in the 80s. And those songs still appeal to people today. He was part of that songwriting team. And to Neil Schon and Jonathan Cain's credit, they understand that's what worked. That's what appealed to those fans and still does today. So when they go out and do a live performance, they can put in a new song like United We Stand or Don't Give Up on Us, and people are going to go, wow, that's good. That kind of sounds like their old stuff. They're still making good stuff. And that's what people want. Okay? Give the people what they want. And that's what Journey is doing. Journey's not trying to reinvent themselves. If you want to critique the production value on the record or the quality of material, yeah, you can go in that direction a little bit, but then bring something of substance to the table. Don't review the album like, okay, during the commercial break of the show I'm watching, I'm going to write this review. And I'm just going to say what I would have said, whether I listen to the album or not. Because my mind has been made up for like 40 years on this band. And even if these people are somewhat younger, they've just inherited all of the BS bleep posting from everybody else who came before them. And they're just cutting and pasting. You know, oh yeah, that Generations album, that really sucks. Okay, have you listened to it? Have you heard some of the songs on it? Yeah, again, Ross Valerie probably shouldn't be singing lead vocals. I get that. But he only sang on one track, you know? There are other bands who've had like 10 throwaway songs and one good song on an album, and the critics are like, oh man, it's groundbreaking. It's breathtaking. What a great album. Look, the other issue is, in the old days, you needed maybe 3 or 4 hit songs on a record, and then you could probably put a bunch of filler on there. Today, there's way more pressure because radio isn't coming to your rescue, right? Radio is not going to start playing Don't Give Up on Us, which would drive the sales of the entire album. Nope. So you have to create an album that is good from start to finish. Very good. Like every song is maybe radio plausible, I'll say. Maybe not all, #1 radio singles, but, you can listen to it from start to finish because, again, you're not going to get any support from radio where they would pound that song every 3 or 4 hours and get you used to it. There is a big difference when people hear the same thing over and over again. You can start off not liking the song when you first hear it, and then a week or two later, after it being in heavy rotation, you're like, yeah, I'm really digging that song. I didn't like it at first, but I got used to it, and now I'm expecting it. I can sing along to it, maybe. They don't like that stuff either. You shouldn't be singing along to songs. You shouldn't be able to understand the words. The words shouldn't comfort you. The words shouldn't resonate with you. No, that's something for, 40 years ago, the cheesy guys and the cheesy gals listening to music. Yeah, that's me. Mr. Cheese, that's me. And I don't care. That's why I've been listening to a lot of country and a lot of other stuff, because I want to hear melody and I want to be able to relate to the lyrics of songs. So in any event, I haven't heard this entire album yet. I've heard a couple of other songs that haven't been released as of yet. I can tell you that I think fans of Journey are going to love this album. If they're objective, right? If they aren't expecting Escape or Frontiers or even Departure for that matter. I do believe, though, that this album is going to fit nicely in their musical canon and could be a bookend. This could be the last album they ever record. I mean, think of it this way, right? If you're Neil Sean and you're getting smacked around by critics 40 years later, you're going to be like, screw it. We'll just go out and play the hits. But see, I know Neil. Neil does not want to just sit there and just be a tribute band to themselves. He wants to go out there and make new music and be relevant. And the industry is saying, look, you guys were never relevant. We're still saying you're really not relevant. We do admit that culturally, because of Don't Stop Believin', because of Steve Perry, because of Stranger Things, because of The Sopranos, whatever, right? You guys are, you're kind of cool, but only in, a very marginal way. You're not artistic. You're not saying anything unique politically speaking. United we stand. Give me a break, right? So that's the critic. That's what they're thinking and saying. And I am definitely not on board with what the critics are saying. I'll listen to the whole thing on Friday, start to finish, and I'll give you my point of view. But I'm kind of preempting the negativity and this idea that, oh, well, Journey kind of sounding like Journey, that's outrageous. Okay, fine. All right, maybe Journey should try to sound more like Van Halen or Pink Floyd or REO Speedwagon, right? Because then maybe they'd be successful if they tried to imitate somebody else. I don't know what critics want at this point, other than to stir up crap and to look like, they're flying high above the rest of us deplorables who enjoy this music, because that's what this is about. And that's why there are a whole bunch of bands that we love that aren't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's a pretty extensive list. And I think there should be a deplorable music Hall of Fame, right? For all of the rubes that plunk down money for concerts, t-shirts, cassettes, vinyl, and whatever else, CDs, 8 tracks. If you go back far enough, you might have an 8-track. We're the ones that made all of these people famous. And the critics, they did nothing for these bands other than to probably, tamp down the enthusiasm level that people had. Oh, you have an REO Speedwagon album in your collection? It's like, yeah, I do. So, you don't like Gary Richrath? Wow. Okay, you don't like Kevin Cronin? I get it. You might not like him now. And by the way, those guys, they kind of float to the critics' point of view on politics, but they're not in the Hall of Fame. Notice that. So, Kevin, just cater to your fans. Don't worry about, if you feel that way yourself and that's who you are politically speaking, fine, but your fans aren't where you are. Your fans are the deplorable crowd, the people that thought maybe something nefarious was up back in 2020. And we're still kind of thinking that a lot of things aren't the way they should be. And, like Journey says, we need to just get back to the way things used to be. It would be a lot better. I don't know if it's ever going to go there, though. And to celebrate that, again, is a no-no. And that's another reason why the critics just probably aren't going to like this record, because it's forward-looking, but it's also backward-looking in the sense that, yeah, wouldn't it be cool to go back to 2019? Yeah, I'd go there. I'd love to go back there. It's way better than where we are now, but all right, I'm just rambling. Again, let me give Jeff another plug. Jeff Scott Soto, JSS, as his, cool fan club. Fan bunch? What's a fan bunch? Fan club probably says it's the JSS fan club. Great album, complicated. Get your copy now, and you might want to pre-order your copy of Freedom, because if the critics don't like it, then it's probably really a great album.